Welcome to Helping Organisations Thrive. Today I have the pleasure of Jason Richmond just prior to Christmas before we all go on our wonderful holiday season. Welcome, Jason.
Good. Thank you, Julian. I appreciate the time and appreciate being here with you.
Yeah. Thank you for coming on. And I'm just going to tell the audience a little bit about who you are. You're the founder and CEO of a company called Ideal Outcomes. That you provide organisational development consulting, change implementation, talent management, coaching, diversity and inclusion, and culture integration into businesses of all sizes. So you do an awful lot in that context. You're also a member of the Forbes Business Council as well, and also an author, and we'll come on to that later on. But as I always ask my guests is, what do you love about what you do?
I think, Julian, the one thing that I'm passionate about is providing assistance and guidance and support for other people to succeed. The one thing that I love about what I do is when we're working with an organization or working with a group of people or working with an individual, to see them apply different skills or behaviors or take a different approach or different attitude and see success in a higher level of production or in a different type of business metric result. And that's what gets me up every morning is the ability to help other people be successful.
And how did you get into that sort of sphere of helping people? What was it? Has it always been there years ago, or was it something that's just developed?
Julian, it's the way I was raised, right? And when we spend a lot of time working with organizations talking about mission and purpose and core values and reflecting on where you've been, the path you've taken, the journey you've taken to get where you are. And some of those core values are ingrained into you from a very, very young age, from a very young standpoint in your professional career. And it really does become kind of an attitude thing like that. Yep.
Right. Brilliant. Excellent.
Yeah.
So we're heading towards the end of the year. I know this episode will go out sometime in January, and people start looking towards the sort of new year. Some sort of nice musical thing going on in the background there.
Yeah, it's I believe it's a clock, and it's probably the top of the hour.
Fantastic. Always good to be reminded of our time. So we're heading towards end of 2020. It's been an interesting year for all of us, I know, and we're heading into 21. And I guess businesses already be doing this and aiming to how do they start to create that sense of growth again and to stimulate, excite individuals, but also to create, I suppose, a platform that will be sustained, because we don't want growth that's just going to happen in the first quarter. We want it to sustain through the next 12 months and beyond. And I know you've written a book, How to Ignite and Grow and sort of sustain growth. What are your sort of, I suppose, your thoughts on that, and what are you talking with your clients at the moment about to help them with that?
Right now, our conversations with clients is been more about evaluating our current processes, the way we do business, the way we've been doing business. I mean, in a global pandemic, in a world or a culture of unknown, of uncertainty, of a reactionary, we have lived in a reactionary mode for the last 9-10 months. I think pretty much across the globe, that's pretty safe to say. And right now we've settled into a new normal. So now we're really taking a look at what policies, what procedures, what processes, what do we need to shift, what's not relevant, and what do we need to tweak and pivot today moving forward, because every organization out there has different structures or different procedures that really aren't relevant in today's world and won't be going forward. And really a lot of my conversations lately, Julian, has been around, let's take a look at those first. Let's see what in your organization has to change, and then work on putting together a plan on how to get that change strategized and then implemented.
Well, you talked about people talking about going back to the the new normal, whatever the new normal is. Do you think we've arrived? Not we never arrived, but do you think we've come to a place that we're in a more normal place than we were like 8 months ago? And what things do we need to think about in this context if we wanted to grow as people or as organizations?
First of all, yes, I think we have come to a place where leaders and organizations are not worried about, okay, we've been through this, it's happened. Okay, now we have to focus on the future. We got to be forward thinking. And a couple of things that come to mind that we work on all the time is, how does that change our relationships? So what focus do we need to put on our relationship within our own teams, our peers, our colleagues, maybe based on the remote workforce situation and that type of stuff, but also how does this impact our client relationships, right? Mm-hmm. How do we, what do we have to do to continually to exceed expectations with clients? Customers' expectations haven't changed in regards to customer service and response and quality and consistency and that type of thing. So how do we maintain that customer relationship to the level we had before and focus on that? And so I think the short answer to your question is the focus on the quality of that relationship internally and externally.
And how do we make that relationship? Let's think about the internal piece, because I think if we concentrate on the internal piece, we can then make it obviously a stronger organization. How do we make that quality, and what sort of qualities do we need to sort of go on into that?
Yeah, and I write a lot about this, Julian, and I think there's two qualities that I speak about and talk about an awful lot, and it's from a leadership perspective. But one is authenticity. And people have always wanted authentic leaders. I mean but I think that has been heightened to a level that we haven't seen before, where people just want the real deal. They want to know. They want to know where they're at, where they stand, what's happening, and I think the need for authentic leadership right now, in regards to how we communicate, what we communicate, that type of thing, including empathy into that authenticity. Mm-hmm. And the second aspect of that then is transparency. So I think from a leadership standpoint, and when you look at leadership blind spots and all, bundle it all together, I think if leaders really strive to be authentic and transparent, it's going to have major impacts on the internal relationship side of things.
Yeah, and I agree. I think authenticity and transparency is key. People want that sort of reality of what you're saying and what you're doing is cognitive of all your values and purposes, and there's no sort of blind spots or things you're hiding. And also, people want that transparency of openness, honesty of the situation, because obviously we've all been through very traumatic announcements through our various governments of what may be or may not be happening, and there's always a battle with how much you share and everything else. We know that. It's a real challenge. So bringing that authenticity, and it's been at the forefront for a number of years, the authenticity, and it's not just within a leadership context, it's within a what you call a social media context, in every aspect of our lives, is being more real with each other. Particularly like on the mental health side of things, it's really important to be open and honest of your struggles. So how are you finding ways to create that authenticity in leadership? What sort of things are you doing, or what are people could do to get a bit more authentic, be authentic, I should say?
Yeah, and I think that's where empathy falls, and Julian, where empathy comes into our meetings, into our conversations. One thing I've been coaching a lot of people on in leadership roles is you need to increase the number of your one-on-ones, right? You need to take more effort, and they don't have to be long conversations, but you need to take a deliberate effort to really try to understand where your employees, where your colleagues are at in their professional and personal lives. Every one of us have gone through some type of change. We're dealing with new environments. I mean, I was working with, I am working with an organization that has, like a lot, 90% of their workforce is working from home, never have worked from home before. And out of that 90%, 60, 70% probably will never come back to the office. I mean, these are the conversations we're having right now. And, when this all first happened, everyone went to work home, took their laptop with them. Right. But they're not used to working purely on a laptop. I mean, we had to go fundamentally all back to the basics and making sure every employee had what they needed in order to be productive. Monitors, kind of a dedicated workspace, and helping people figure that out instead of sitting at their kitchen table or sitting in their bedroom or sitting, and the distractions you have. So, I mean, and again, it's not something that you intuitively even thought about. People went home, took their laptop, everyone continued working, but their environment changed. And you really, and having that empathy and everyone's environment's different. So having that level of empathy and really understanding where your employees and where your team members are at, I think is a big, big first step to being truly, authentic. Does that make sense?
And I think that empathy, and it's interesting. I think having that almost as your, say, guiding light was almost like a guiding heart, really, isn't it? And that's what empathy is. And it's interesting. Yeah, a lot of people have gone through the whole process of working from home, how to get more effective, and people's environments have changed. And it also, what comes with that is where people were used to the social interaction, as in, going to the, the coffee place to get a coffee or the water cooler, whatever you want to call it. And that was part of the way they worked.
Yep.
That's gone, and people are just sitting there looking at a screen. And I guess it's trying to, and I've had this with lots of clients, how to create this environment somehow that's not forced or false, that can create those conversations in a more, not just a work sense, but in a social way. How are you finding that, not just with your own company, but other companies you're dealing with? How are they creating that sort of helpful environments, to interact, to be more productive?
Yep. Well, you always have Zoom, Microsoft meetings, Teams, all that stuff, right? But I can't tell you over the last 3 months how many times I've heard I'm burned out, Zoom burnout, right? A lot of organizations are, using the social media platforms, even have internal, message boards and communication boards. I think, in my opinion, and what we've been working on is pushing and striving for a higher level or a higher volume amount of, recognition for people and people's efforts and what they've accomplished. Right? We focused a lot of efforts on, really pinpointing and socially communicating and highlighting accomplishments of people in difficult times. Right. And not false recognition, not fluff, but really making that effort from a team standpoint, on a social media standpoint, to raise the level of recognition and appreciation, those types of things, to make that social connection, if you will. Deloitte just published their human capital report that they do every year, and this was one of the first times in a long time that I noticed that they really talk a lot about belonging. Right. So people in the workforce today, in a remote workforce, that is one of the biggest characteristics that they've lost, is that sense of belonging. So leaders, managers, culture, HR policies and procedures really need to have the consideration of making sure your efforts provide the feeling of belonging for your workforce. And those types of efforts, I think, help make that connection. If people feel like they belong, they'll be empowered, they'll be committed, they'll be engaged.
It's interesting because we're social creatures, and we all need to be part of a group, whether that's a sports group, work group, whatever context. We always have, that's how we express ourselves socially
Yep.
through our social identity with others. And that belonging, as you say, you suddenly one Friday you were working in an office belonging to this group of people.
Yeah.
And on Monday, for the next 6 months, and probably longer, you've been at home and sort of connected virtually. And it is a challenge to try and maintain that sense of belonging in the social context. And, some are more introverted, and a whole host of stuff, that dynamics that come with that, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And it's going back to the sort of transparency piece. And I think this is where I talk to a lot of leaders where they struggle with how much they can be transparent, whether there is a right or wrong. Is there a scale? Is there a grade of how transparent? And, because you don't want to be pouring your guts out. Or do you want to be pouring your guts out? And, do you want to appear that you've got it all together, or do you want to appear because that's positive or not? I mean, what are your thoughts on transparency, and how far do we go? And what does it really mean in the context of a workplace?
Well, when I think of transparency, I think of honesty. All right. And transparent communication and things like that, and new initiatives and new directions, the level of commitment a leader has, to his communication and to the efforts. But it also has to be, there's got to be a little bit of optimism and motivation in that communication also. Yes, there's leaders and managers that can't communicate to the entire workforce everything that's going on. But what they can communicate is they've got to have the right positive attitude and to be able to communicate it in a way and in a what I like to call what's in it for me. So when I work with managers, or I do some coaching and I work on communications with organizations, when my team engages with a client about that type of communication, we really push them to their transparent communication is communicating in a way in what's in it for the person you're communicating to. So they see that benefit, they see that value in what you're saying. And I'd put that all under the umbrella of, honesty. I've worked with managers before, that middle management level, and you've probably heard this over the years or in your career at some point, when a supervisor or a director is communicated to a team and he says he might position something, or he or she might position something saying, well, I don't like it either. I don't agree with it, but this is the way it's going to be. That's not transparent communication. You've got to get behind that idea and communicate that in a way and that it's good for the organization, it's good for the people within the organization. I don't know if that answered your question, but that's what really came to mind.
Just on the honesty piece, because obviously there's an honesty piece and there's also a timing, isn't there? Mm-hmm. And how much we share at various points, which goes down to being effective communication. And it's that balance where you want to demonstrate you're sharing stuff that people feel that you're not holding back. Mm-hmm. You're not playing games, but they don't, but then sharing enough that they don't get overwhelmed and suddenly they're a bit like, oh, I don't know what's going on.
Yeah, for sure. And another thing with that also, we also push and strive leaders and managers in their transparent communication to throw out challenges, right? Part of transparent communication to me, in my definition, in my opinion, is it's a two-way dialogue. So be open enough to hear ideas, be inclusive enough to hear different approaches. And a lot of times in your communication and especially in difficult times is get your employees' input in their response instead of being directive, right? Make it a two-way dialogue and say, this is our current situation, right? I'd be open to hear ideas, situations, nuances, something I haven't thought about. And it creates a group of empowerment, a level of empowerment then, instead of just a directive.
No, I agree. That sort of two-way,
yep.
And it feels that they're part of the situation or the problem or the solution or whatever. That it's a contributory sort of factor, isn't it? Yeah. They feel they're in it together. It's not you're being told to do this. You're feeling you're empowered because we want you to play our parts. Exactly. There's a lot of talk about leaders showing vulnerability, which is this sense of, I suppose my definition of vulnerability, I suppose it stems back from the sort of Brené Brown mindset of stepping into the arena without the full knowledge of you're going to be successful or not successful, where you don't know all the answers. What are your thoughts on that? Do you think that we should be more vulnerable, or is that too far?
I think there needs to be a level of vulnerability. Sure, it's a way to demonstrate who you are as a person, who you are as a leader. It's a way for you to demonstrate your own core values and beliefs. So I do think there is a level of vulnerability. However, with that said, I believe the individual contributors in the workforce and organizations now are also looking for leadership. I mean, they're looking for direction, right? They're looking for certainty, right? They're looking for a level of confidence, and they're hungry for, we're going to take this next step in 2021. We're going to accomplish these things, and this is how we're going to do it. We're going to do it together. Right. So yes, there's a level of vulnerability that needs to be in there, but they're striving and really looking for direction. And that takes that's a different leadership skill to be able to have that plan, communicate that plan, and reassure and build confidence in the organization that plan is going to work.
No, I totally agree. And do you think this year has changed or should have changed the way we lead organizations?
Absolutely. In all the ways we're talking about. Right? In all the ways we're talking about. I think the level of take micromanagement. I mean, my personal opinion and belief, it doesn't, very, very few occasions is that a relevant leadership style, right? I mean, and right now with remote workforces and different teams and agile leadership and agile work structures and cross-functional groups and committees and work structures, I think our leadership behaviors have changed dramatically.
Yeah, and I think also there's been a more heightened observational of what leadership should be doing, because people are looking, because surprisingly, as people don't want to be told what to do, people want leaders. And I was talking to a leader recently about how to be more visible, certainly in times of uncertainty. And the example I cited was, it's like being on a boat or a ship or whatever, and you're heading into a storm, and you're one of the crew members, and you're below, and you get up onto the top, and you look up and you see the captain is there. He's giving it, he's heading into the storm, and just at least he's there, and he's having a go. He's trying to steer where he's going. But if you looked up and saw nobody at the helm, you'd be thinking, we're doomed. And it's that sense of leadership, isn't it? A sense of visible leadership, but also having the courage to have a go. Not entirely sure how we're going to do it, but we're going to have a go, and this is the direction we're going to head in towards. Definitely. Yeah.
I have seen, and just an example of that level of leadership with the organizations we work with and stuff like that. I have seen more weekly or bi-weekly communication updates to the entire organization about, usually the, top 5 or 6 highlights of the week or the 2-week period of what we accomplished as an organization, from top level leadership, from a CEO, from a COO, from a, C-level person. And when that is powerful and when that actually has an impact is when it's consistent. Right. It can't be, on a Friday and then go a month and then something else comes out and then the next. I mean, it's got to be. It becomes kind of a consistent behavior. But I have seen more and more that type of leadership communication from an executive level, updating the whole company on direction and success. And I've seen a major impact within morale and employee engagement because of those types of activities and efforts.
Yeah. And I think you mentioned that word consistency. It's that keeping it going, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's a wonderful security thing of having something consistent. People think it's quite dull and boring to be consistent, but actually people love it. It's actually really helpful. And so as we enter 21 in the next couple of weeks, what other things would you tell a leader to be doing apart from what we've just discussed? What other aspects as we trying to continue to navigate these uncertain times, and we're always on uncertain times, but on this sort of level, really?
Be creative, right?
Yeah.
And I talk about this, and it's could be controversial, but check your ego at the door.
Check your what, sorry?
Your ego. Check your ego at the front door.
Yes.
Everybody in the organization is going into a new normal, right? And you'd be amazed at how many people within your organization and on your teams has powerful insight and powerful direction that could make your life and your job easier if you have the ability to sit back and listen and take it in and create an inclusive environment of different approaches, different ideas, from different angles, from different perspectives. And your job as a leader could become a lot more easy and a lot more effective if you check the ego at the door and create that inclusive environment where you're open to hear these types of things. Might take just a little more time, right? And I'm not saying you're going to implement everything you hear, right? But people love to be heard.
Definitely.
And it's amazing the power and the insight that you can gain from your team if you allow it.
Yeah, and that's the wonderful thing you may get from it. You'll get things that you never even would have thought of yourself.
Exactly.
From your team, and it's almost a risk not to do that as opposed to risk to do that, really, isn't it? Yes.
Correct.
Yes. No, I think that's good advice for 21 is put your ego at the door, or leave your ego at the door, to say, and let your team be allowed to be more creative. No, that's fantastic. Now, you've written a book, and do you want to just tell a little bit about what it's called, what it's about, what inspired it, and then where people can get hold of it as well? So that'd be important.
The title is Culture Spark, and it's on Amazon, and there's an Audible version on audible.com. You can find it on Amazon. You can link it from my LinkedIn at Jason Richmond, Ideal Outcomes Inc. Off of LinkedIn. But what inspired it is in all our consulting work with organizations and groups of people and teams of people and alignment, we've realized, all our work over the last 20 years have really impacted organizational culture, the work environment, the environment we create that we're working in to get done what we have to accomplish. And I took 2 years and did nothing but interview executives, leaders, hundreds of them across the globe in all kinds of different industries. Instead of sitting back and writing down my thoughts and ideas, I wanted to validate those thoughts and ideas and pull those best practices into this concept. And we created a very, very simple, culture model where what we're trying to do and what I tried to produce is a resource book for any leader, any manager that was dealing with a potential situation around engagement or personnel or culture that is full of different tools, ideas, templates that they could take right out of the book, right out of the research, and just implement themselves. To raise a level of engagement, to raise performance within a team, and really, I really wanted Strive to take a very tactical, applicable, relevant, approach that was easy to implement, and that's what we accomplished with it. And right now, I'm hoping to have. I'm working now, and I'm on target to first part of March to kind of get the next book published around culture, and it's more about remote leadership. So I'm working on my second book right now. Yeah, I should have it. It should be out on Amazon, I hope by March 1st.
Brilliant! Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah. So
that's fantastic. So that first book sounds really sort of pragmatic, very practical, very almost hands-on type of approach.
It really is. And you could also find it on my website, idealoutcomesinc.com.
Perfect. That's brilliant. Well, I really great been talking with you, Jason,
Yeah.
and talking about leadership and how we can be the best leader we can right now in this right situation. How else can people get hold of you in terms of through your company? Is it?
I would say through the website, idealoutcomesinc.com, or through LinkedIn, and they can look just at Jason Richmond on LinkedIn or Ideal Outcomes Inc. On LinkedIn, and they'll find contact information and emails and all sort of things.
Well, brilliant. Well, thank you for coming on, and I do so have a good sort of holiday festive period over the next couple of weeks.
You too, Julian. I certainly appreciate it. Stay safe, stay healthy.
Yeah,
I wish you the best.
Excellent. Thank you.
Cheers.